So we welcome our esteemed guests and cherished residents, and thank you all for joining us today in our last episode of Community Talks for the year 2024. Joining us today, two experienced guests. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Mahmoud Al-Burai. Dr. Mahmoud is a prominent figure in the field of sustainability and is a recognized leader and urban activist and also a catalyst for positive change within cities. His recognition includes founding the first real estate institution in the Middle East and pioneering the first SDGs-inspired think tank in the region. Beyond Dr. Mahmoud's accomplishments, he's actively engaged in leading urban policy consultancy projects across various countries, including the UAE and the MENA region. Dr. Mahmoud's expertise have positioned him as a key figure in shaping sustainability and SDGs within the region. Joining us today as well, Engineer Andrew Ferrar. Engineer Andrew has more than 35 years experience in the field of facilities management and real estate services. Andrew worked in global organizations and recently been in the Middle East for about 10 years. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us today to discuss a very important topic, which is resiliency. We've been hearing a lot about resiliency recently, and there is a very big move towards accomplishing resiliency within the communities. So, Dr. Mahmoud, what is resiliency in communities, and what's the difference between resiliency and asset management? We can start just as a definition of resiliency.
Well, thank you so much for having me today, and glad to be with Andrew in this episode. I just want to say initially that we're living nowadays in what we call it the VUCA world, where things are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, and that we are living in a world where we have economic, social, environmental shocks across the systems. And that requires from government, cities, buildings to be ready for all these shocks. So to take this concept of resilience from general economic resilience or social or environmental resilience to community resilience, which can be defined as how communities can deal and how they can sustain, resist, and recover from shocks. And that can be different types of shocks, but the most obvious one is maybe climate shock, the ones that we had in April, or it can be a fire, it can be even an economic shock for the building. And that's related to asset management in a sense that it depends on how community can be prepared for such shocks and what kind of asset management strategies are put in place by the management companies. But this cannot be done by the management company or government alone, and that's where we always say community should be part of preparing for such shocks and be ready for shocks and emerge stronger from these shocks. So we learned a lot of lessons. How do we absorb all these lessons learned and revisit our systems, our procedures, our assets, and make sure that they are resilient, and community are part of this, and they can be part of dealing with all these kind of challenges and shocks.
Beautiful. So I understand communities are part of the bigger society, and whatever we do in communities will impact the bigger society at large. What is the difference between asset management and resilience? Asset management is normally taking care of the day-to-day operation.
Yeah. More tactical.
Exactly. And can you just give us a better view of the day-to-day difference from being ready from a resiliency standpoint?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you're the experts in this field. And being in the government side, we've seen a lot of buildings in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and we've seen the way they're managed. Just to talk something that's close to everyone who's watching us today is that buildings which are well managed, great asset management people on site, they usually have higher value. the reputation in the market is better than the buildings that are not well managed. And we've seen a lot of well-established communities where you see one bed here selling as 20% less than the other building. And if you go deeply into why, you will see that here there is a professional management company, a little bit maybe more expensive than the other one, but they managed to maintain the building, operate the building, run the day-to-day operations, make sure that the building is well maintained, taking care of, engaging communities, running social activities as well. So all these things are an important part of asset management. But resilience is more of, when you have a resilient strategy, this means how you prepare your assets, which is one of the dimensions of our resilient building tool that we developed in the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office. The most important pillar is the asset pillar. And that talks about your assets within the building, how you manage these assets, and as a main pillar of building resilience within communities. Are you ready? What you have in stock? Redundancy in case of there's any climate change risk, in case of fire, what you do, what kind of assets on site, what kind of assets that can be brought to the site within 15-20 minutes, who can be called, who can be brought to the site, and all this stuff.
Nice. Andrew, since this is your area of expertise and you helped us, thank you for your volunteering to assess through the pilot stage of UNDRR resilience tool.
Yep.
Is there anything that you noticed differently from the day? Because normally people would think that the facility management and our risk mitigation plan would be the same as resiliency. So what would be key take away from the pilot that you helped us in assessing?
I think, as Dr. Mahmood said there, it's looking at the entire asset structure in terms of the infrastructure itself. Do we have any backup plans? Make sure that both, if you've got a run and a standby pump, for example, that they're both in operation, that they can be both operated as and when required, that we've got regular maintenance done at the right time, so we're doing the right things to the right assets at the right time. Things, as I mentioned there, critical spares, things on a long lead time, hold those in stock, make sure if something does fail, that we can replace it quickly and get services back up and running quickly. Again, in terms of essential infrastructure, we're looking there at increased levels of maintenance to things that are more important than less important assets. So there's a number of things that go into asset management that Dr. Mahmood articulated very well there.
Yeah, it's very interesting that the resiliency is not only asset management or the asset and infrastructure aspect of it. Normally, would think community is hard assets, but the resiliency topic covers all three aspects: the people, the hard assets, as well as the digital assets. So that's where I found it very interesting. Like working in the asset management sector, we normally focus on the hard assets of the community and like the firefighting systems, and we kind of think resilience is only pertaining to these assets, which brings me to the next question. We have 6 dimensions that are measured through the resiliency tool, and I would like to get to know more about, and our audience as well, more about the 6 dimensions. So we already covered the asset and infrastructure bit of it. How do you describe the economy and finance dimension?
Good question, but really just back to the assets, you talked about people, hard assets, and digital assets. We've seen from experience and from international cases that countries and cities who got several kind of shocks in the system were more prepared. And it's not about their digital assets nor hard assets, it was about people. So people became resilient. And that's why when we talk about resilient, we always talk also about resilient people. And actually there is a concept that I like even more than resilience, which is called anti-fragility. There is a book called Anti-Fragility, which talks about being resilient is that how you restore to your original nature after being hit by a shock. So how fast you go back to that pre-disaster or pre-stress issue, you are resilient. Like it took you 6 months to go back to where you used to be before the crisis. However, anti-fragility is when you benefit from this crisis and you become stronger. And this is what we have here in the UAE. And COVID time, how we dealt with COVID. COVID is also a shock and can be repeated anytime in the future. This is part of the Global Risk Report of the World Economic Forum. We're expecting disasters, health-related ones. So building the digital assets and people are two things that I think making big difference. So South Korea, for example, built a lot on digital assets, and you find them did very well in dealing with COVID. So assets is very important, and without assets, we cannot move to the rest of the 6 dimensions. So the second dimension you asked about was the economy and finance part. And here we're talking about the accounting equality, the numbers, how we create long-term value in managing buildings. How do we anticipate what's needed in terms of cost, spending, the sinking fund of buildings? How do we make sure we have enough funds to replace certain major systems within the community or the building? So that's here we're talking about economic sustainability of communities, the collection of service charge to make sure that these communities are running smoothly. So if you look across the board, we see that, for example, sinking fund is not being adequately collected in so many communities, and this is risk for the economic part of it. And this means if there is any major spending needing, you will not be able to cover it, and you have to knock on doors, and time can be an issue. So maybe we need to solve the problem within 1 hour or half an hour. So if we don't have enough money in the bank account, that's a big issue. So we say that to have a resilient community, we want to make sure that we also have financial resilience, how we manage our assets financially, how do we make sure we have enough money in to manage the communities.
I think in terms of the sinking fund as well, I think it's important that you plan ahead, that we don't just think we've got enough money, when something fails we can replace it. It's about planning ahead and making sure you've got that life cycle plan in place so you know that really you can expect when things will need replacing before they fail. And that's an important aspect of life cycle planning.
Right. And beyond that, we can always think of additional tools that help us build resilience within the existing assets, because normally the reserve fund covers the existing assets. But now with the new thinking of resilience, we're finding that there are ways to build additional capability of the systems that we have in place or the assets that we have in place to make it even more resilient.
Yeah, I think I'd just add to that obviously when you replace an asset, we're not looking at where we can avoid like-for-like replacement. We're looking at an enhancement. We're looking at putting more technology into the systems and the infrastructure to give us that advance warning about the condition of the asset, how it's actually performing at any one time.
Yeah, and thinking ahead, because today it's like the asset management is not the way it used to be in the past. Today you have the digital twins, you have way more advanced technologies. So it is it's good to start from the basics, but also we need to always have this future lookout.
And if you allow me on the economy, something I don't want to forget, which is how also we can make commercial value from our communities. So how do we? It's not about one side of the coin, which is the expenses, the service charge, but also how do we maximize the value from buildings? So facade of building can be advertisement tool within the communities. Certain facilities can be added, can generate money, can reduce service charge. So I think also there is a space here for innovation when we talk about the economy, which is how do we create more on the income side rather than focusing on the expenses.
Exactly. That need the creative minds, like creative management companies that can come up with solutions. Beautiful. The third one is a very important one for everybody, which is the natural and urban plans. Resilience and the natural environment, pollution, air quality. Can you shed more light on that dimension?
A lot of time when we talk about pollution, we focus on external, but reports says that inside buildings you have higher rates of pollution than outside. And that's why there are a lot of research on the relationship between our environment and the human health. And it has been, we spend 90% of our time within buildings, inside buildings. So that has impact on our productivity and our health, well-being, and so on. So it's important for resilient buildings also, resilient communities, to make sure that we measure all of these things. We make sure that we have, we focus on air quality, we focus on water quality, lighting quality, materials used, the emissions comes from materials, how they impact to humans. So if we want to build resilient buildings, we want to make sure that everything within that building adds to human well-being. And after COVID, actually, we as humans and investors, we see them now in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, have become more cautious about, is it a green building? Is it a sustainable building? What kind of materials are used? Is this a good material? So, and this will become even more and more trendy as we go on. So I see that Provis, we worked with you on several projects on getting companies, technology companies, to come and test their technologies in air quality, in water saving, in health and well-being. So all these are important things that add to the resilience of buildings, because resilient building will definitely lead to resilient people, because it will impact their health and their well-being.
Absolutely. And that takes us to the fourth dimension, which is the well-being and society. And this is something that we take seriously in our communities, where we focus on the social connections between community members and the well-being of our residents from a fitness, health perspective. Would you like to add more how we can ensure our residents as well are resilient?
Well, I think the social sustainability, social resilience are elements that we focus a lot on nowadays in the United Arab Emirates. We're a country that has 217 nationalities. So how do you make sure that there is social cohesion, there is a social, let's say, understanding, working together? That's part of creating social resilience within communities. Make sure that we're maybe different races, different religions, but at the end of the day, one country, tolerant country. So that's part of it. The second part of it is how do we create common spaces for people to communicate, to talk, to understand each other better. So that requires investment in the asset side and infrastructure, making sure that our communities are walkable, bikeable, there are sport activities. You create a community that kind of push people to be more healthy, and the well-being of people at the top of it. So it's not just enough to have health and safety requirements and well standards. No, also going back to people and how we make communities source of creating healthier communities.
Yeah, which leads to the happiness metrics. One of the happiness metrics is like the well-being. Andrew, would you like to add to?
I just think it's really important that communities do engage in health and sport in particular, and I know a lot of our communities have really great facilities in terms of children's play areas, things like that. We've got running tracks, we've got cycle tracks, things that really actively encourage people to get out and stop watching TV, really. I think that's really important.
And two aspects as well, Andrew, is how do we create child-friendly communities, and how do we create we call them people of determination, kind of friendly environment. We want to make sure that our communities also are inclusive, leaving no one behind. Kids can enjoy it, old people can enjoy it. So that's also part of the social and society and well-being aspect of resilience.
Absolutely. And this year, I think we've done a lot of work on the children's side. A lot of effort was done. Normally, the fitness classes are from the teenagers group or like any children above 7 years old. This year, the focus was more on the babies and toddlers. So we took several initiatives to start sensory classes and babies, mother classes and story times, which really had a very positive impact on the residents. Not forgetting about people of determination as well. So it is always important to encourage and make sure that we recognize everyone within the community. So I think this is a very important
We've done research on investors and on owners and what they want. And we've seen a shift that nowadays we see more people want parks, green areas.
Right.
They're going to pay even more if you provide such things. So we see a lot of focus on living next to schools, living next to hospitals, healthcare activities. So I think we need to think of our communities beyond the real estate aspect, the services, the ease of life, the sport, the activities, the connection, the tolerance, how people can work together. I go to some communities, I see people talking to each other, neighbors, feel like they're family. And some communities, you don't feel like people know each other.
Yeah.
So, and this is a difference between successful communities and non-successful communities in terms of social aspect.
Right. And we see now, like even cities are creating the pocket parks,
Yeah.
more engagements between the private sector, public sector, creating this beautiful
Absolutely.
connection. Our fifth dimension is the governance and leadership.
Well, I think in terms of standards, really, we're looking at when we talk about governance, we're like, we want to recognise standards and achieve those standards so that we're maintaining assets to a recognised standard, that we're achieving exactly what we set out to do, and that anybody can come in and audit any of our performance measures and validate the fact that we are doing what we say we're doing, what we're supposed to do. So I think it's important that we recognise what we want to try and achieve in terms of whether it be sustainability or efficiency or performance, and that we can be audited against our results.
Yeah, and maybe to just add to what Andrew said, in terms of leadership here, we're talking about owners committees and the role that they play in making sure that they're the voice of the community, but also they're part of managing the resilience of communities. So management company is there to facilitate, but leadership of owners and owners committees is important to create a kind of resilient society. So here we're talking about synergy, resources utilization, coordination, communication. All these are important, part of creating a leadership within the resilience context and community.
I think it's also important to mention that we need to listen to the voice of the customer as well.
Yes,
in terms
exactly.
of owners communities, at the end of the day, it's their money we're spending.
Correct.
So they want to know they're getting value for money, and
And it is their community, they live it
concerns.
day in, day out, so they would know what suits best and what are the needs. We may come up with certain concepts every year, but how it is implemented, it's based on the demographics and the requirements of that specific.
Plus the importance of looking at resilience as not cost. Because a lot of resilience projects are costly. You need to develop. And the only time you see the benefit is when a crisis happens. You say, Alhamdulillah, we've done this. We saved a lot. And then there's research shows that for every $1 we invest in resilience, we have $4 saving in post-recovery. So we should look at resilience as leaders and leadership as investment in the future, rather than cost. And this is adding to this service chart. Let's cut here, let's cut there. This, in the long run, is not good for the community.
Yeah, I think the benefit of resilience as well is that the customer really doesn't know something's happened. If you've got resilience, we've got standby systems, we're really resolving things before it impacts the customer. I think that's an important part of a resilient society.
Absolutely, yeah. So that takes us to the final dimension, which is the strategy and innovation, which is the pillar of everything we're talking about.
Yeah.
How we can reuse the assets that we have currently, how we can put innovative solutions, low-cost solutions that can help us on the long term. So would you like to shed more light on this, Doctor?
Well, I think what we covered so far, everything we do is part of vision. And we are in a country that has vision, right? If you go in the UAE, we have a vision, we have a strategy. We know what we want to see in 2071. So it's important to have vision, strategy and vision at the communities level. And for us to be creative and innovative, we need to utilize all resources we have. We need to be creative in creating commercial value within buildings. We need to be creative in terms of looking at assets and resources of communities and to make them more friendly, sustainable, how to make sure that buildings and communities are resilient. So innovation is required, and in every single thing we do, we need to be innovative. How do we communicate with the owners? How do we make sure that we use the assets of buildings and communities in the right way? Save money, create more value.
Us as investors and community managers should look after the resiliency and take this topic seriously. Would you like to add more other than, one of the things I can think of is that like the happiness metrics, the happier the community, the more attractive it is for residents and people to live in. Other values you see?
I mean, from research we've done in different communities in the United Arab Emirates, we always see that communities that are well managed, it reflects into the value and into the rental. So if you are an investor, this will be reflected into the, the rate of return. But if you are an end user, it will reflect on your health, well-being, safety. There are a lot of research on happiness. You mentioned happiness. And sorry, I talk a lot about research, being a professor also in university, so we do a lot of research. So we found that the most sustainable sources of happiness are the ones that comes from social aspect. So how do we make sure that there is a social sustainability within communities is an important part of it. So overall, how it will reflect? It will reflect on property value. It will reflect on people's health, well-being, and peace of mind. And also their investment. At the end of the day, it will be maximized, right? Your value will be high. Yeah. I know that I'm not here advocating in this way. A little bit left a little bit about it, which I'm not advocating that we should also overcharge people, service charge, and tell them because we want to create better value. No, it's about how do we strike a balance. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also benefit for the user of the asset as well, not just the owner of the asset. Yeah. Obviously, efficient running saves in terms of utility bills. So maximising, again, reducing emissions and saving money for people throughout the entire lifestyle of the asset.
Yeah, and on the asset efficiency as
Absolutely.
well. Yeah, that will impact the efficiency of the assets, and the more we take care of our assets, the more resilient it is to external shocks.
It is. And
the longer it will
last.
last.
Investor. Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. So on the long run, yes, it will be, cost savings. Well, thank you both Dr. Mahmoud and Engineer Andrew. Before we go ahead and start taking questions from our residents and participants today, would like to end this with some safety tips. During the festivities, now everyone's getting in a mood for the holiday season. We're going to have lots of gatherings, lots of nice decorations in the house and outside the house. So, Andrew, would you like to give us some advice?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned about decorations. Often this time of year, people get some lights, electric lights out of a box that have been stored away and packed in boxes for a year. It's important that you check those before you put them into service. Make sure the bulbs are not broken. Just inspect the wires and the plug, make sure there's no damage. If you're going to have things like candles and decorations in the house, try and use flameless candles if possible. And if you have to use candles, then please keep them away from children and pets. One thing I see quite a lot is overloading of electrical sockets. So never use adapters inside an extension lead. Never put an extension lead into another extension lead. If you're going to buy things like extension leads, make sure they've got a BSEN kite mark. So I know you can buy many things on the market here that get imported and they're not really compliant to any kind of safety regulations, so please be careful of that. Similarly, this time of year the weather's cooling down, so people start to use heaters inside the house. Haven't been used for months and months, so please check those. If you're going to use a gas heater in a house, please install a carbon monoxide detector. Very cheap, you can buy them from many of the hardware stores. Just an additional layer of safety. I think that's really important.
Very nice. So this is inside the house. What if I'm traveling during the holiday?
Yeah.
Any tips?
Yeah, well, if you're travelling, check your travel plans before you go. I think that's really important. If you're going to be driving in a car, then please check the car. So I see invariably people driving in this country without lights on. And I think a lot of the time your dashboard lights up and your lights may not be on. So please just check the functionality of your lights. Make sure you have them turned on, especially when it's dark. Tyre pressures, just get them inspected. You don't even need to get out of your car. You go to a garage, they'll do it for you. So no reason why you can't do that. Obviously, don't text and don't use your mobile phone while you're driving. Don't get distracted. If you feel tired, go to a service station, have a coffee, have a quick sleep, and then go back on your way. And wear your seatbelt. Don't drive too close to the car in front, and observe the speed limits. I think they're the main things for me.
Oh, excellent. One of the main things we normally cautious about is the water, because going on long leave, turning the water valves off. If you don't have access, you can contact the community manager, and then they can assist you.
I think one of the biggest areas of potential leak in a house now is the shutaf hoses. So they've all got a little valve or a turn-stop key on the side of them. Please turn them off if you're going to be away from the house. They cause a lot of damage if you're not home when they go off. Additionally, if you're going to leave the house for several days, my advice would be to leave the air conditioning on just to try and combat any humidity issues. You can raise the temperature up to maybe 25, so it's not cooling, but it's just ventilating and keeping fresh air moving around the house.
That's a very good tip. We normally think that turning the AC on is only for the summertime. So
I think, again, it's a coastal region, so we do get very humid air at more or less all times of the year. So.
Okay, very nice. Dr. Mahmoud, would you like to have any closing remarks before we start taking questions?
I want to thank Andrew for giving me advice now, driving back from Abu Dhabi to Dubai. But thanks, everyone, and thanks, Rima and Provis. I think what you're doing is great in terms of, such awareness are important, because the most important part of resilience is creating preparedness. And this is part of making sure that communities are prepared and ready. So thanks again for having me, and wish everyone is the best.
Thank you. Thank you both.
And Happy New Year in advance.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thanks. So if anyone from the attendees would like to ask questions, we're open for any inquiries or clarification you may have. Again, thank you so much for joining us. That's a very important topic and a big movement to start working forward to. And we're very excited. And hopefully we hear more from you. And we wish everybody a very happy new year and a very resilient communities. Take care. See you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.